Hello, welcome to my video journal on German Expressionism. And I'm going to be focusing on the film The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, mostly because I saw Nosferatu before and I thought it'd be cool to do something new. So we watched that. It was lots of fun. But let's hop into the questions just because I don't know how long I'll ramble. Or hopefully not ramble, but talk. Okay, so number one, how is German Expressionism represented in the film, evident in the film, and what is it? So German Expressionism is a style of filmmaking originating in Germany following World War I as the country descended into Republican authoritarianship. There was an economic decline, kind of like a crisis going on there. Rich and poor were super divided, and authoritarianship was oppressive as it is. So people had to find an outlet for this, for a way to express how they feel about it and release some of that anxiety. So they did that through expressionist art. So film, you kind of have to communicate through visuals at this time. There's no sound. So because of that, the visuals have to be detailed and they have to bring something to the narrative. Expressionist visuals seek to express feelings and moods and can be surreal. So the goal isn't to be realistic, it's to illustrate themes, emotions, and the psychology of a character. You'll see how this ties into our main character, Francis, later on. So because it's expressionist film, the settings and props conjure up messages in their image. So I want to talk about a couple images in the film that really highlight the expressionist aspects of them. So first I'd like to start off with the spiked mountains. The spiked mountain of homes you see. I'll link the photos at the end of these specific scenes. I believe it's around 2 minutes in. You see all the homes building up and then a church on top, and all the roofs of the homes are twisted and spiked and just look kind of like scales or something pokey that you don't really want to touch. But then on top you see the church, which is marked by its spikes, but because at the top it kind of has an extra weight to it. We'll talk about the image of hierarchy later. But all the steeples are triangular and pointed, and this creates that feeling of danger and inhospitality. Later, after the clerk is found dead, if you notice, the window in his room is also a triangle, a pointed shape. His corpse is on one end, and on the offending end of the triangle, and this kind of keeps enhancing, fortifying that idea of triangles and pointed imagery being with violence. If you think about, rules of composition, generally people think that triangles create tension or a suspense and disbalance because of they have a rigid directionality, and you can't really balance anything on top of triangle, and it has the condensing of one end kind of brings weight to that. So by having the triangle shapes be kind of in instances of violence and death, it really hammers home that the public's in danger, their houses are pointed, everything around us is pointed, and it's been built that way by people who have power. Werlin says how Caligari's settings, some simply painted on canvas backdrops, are weirdly distorted, a jumble of clashing oblique angles, with caricatures of narrow streets, misshapen walls, odd rhombic windows, and leaning door frames. So he's kind of picking up on the same points here that I was bringing up, that the odd shapes kind of make you feel uneasy. I really like how he called it a caricature of narrow streets, because everything there is decipherable of what it's supposed to be, but it's done in such an over-the-top way that it's really saying more than just this is a street. It's saying this is a street inside a society that is consuming. It's dangerous, it's dark, it makes you feel small. So all these expressionist values make the scene a little bit, have more subtext. Another example of expressionist imagery in the film is the clerk's chair. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on, but you can see how authorities sit on a high chair, so they're literally looking down on average people. It's just like, it shows that literal separation between authority and the public. Again, by doing a overly dramatic, tall seat, because you gotta, like I said, you have to show as much as you can with the image that you can produce, especially at this time. As the crash course mentions, German Expressionism uses Meisenstein. I think I said that wrong, but it's basically like the settings, the props, their placement, and the consideration that goes into that. And in here, it reflects the psychology of the subjects. You know, Francis's mental state is reflected in the film by having all these twisting, confusing, nonsensical settings. It's also like reflective of the narrator who's telling the story. And as you see, the settings become more normal, I would say, once it's revealed that Francis is actually making it all up in his cell, because he is insane. Also, really quick, I want to say I knew that all along because of this chair that's in like all these different scenes, and I kept being like, why is that weird chair there? And then I thought about it, and I was like, oh, it's because it all takes place in one spot. And then also the Jane being quiet in the beginning was kind of off-putting and weird, so I thought something was going to happen to her, and turns out, once again, I'm a genius, and I know everything, apparently. I wish. Okay, moving on. How is the German zeitgeist reflected in the film? So, as I know from just my history classes, and also the crash course goes over it, and Werlin discusses it a little bit, Germany during post-World War I has a lot of problems, a lot of oppressive structure and authoritarianism, and that's kind of the core critique that the film is producing. In several scenes, like I mentioned earlier, government figures are sitting on high, stylized chairs. When Caligari goes to the clerk's office to get his license to be at the fair, he's tiny compared to the tall clerk, and he's also kind of a short stature anyways, but it makes him look small. And I actually felt bad for him. I was on his side in the beginning. The clerk is like disinterested and kind of annoyed that he's even asking, even though it's his job, which is typical of political leaders and criticism against government leaders in Germany at this time. You know, this choice to make the chair this way is expressive and illustrates, you know, the frustration of condescending oppressive authority. Like I said, they're looking down on them, and they're showing it in a way that's literal so that you can't miss it. Also, the sights of the town have like spiked flags around, different drapery that kind of feels oppressive, and like there's something hidden behind. And they're not going for realism, obviously. In certain parts feel theatrical. So that kind of further establishes this idea of government and secrecy and, manipulation and constructed reality. Fascism kind of does a lot as a tactic, is to construct reality and just try to enforce it as much as possible. The economic crash that happened post-war also, like I said, puts weight on between rich and the poor. Those who are well off are okay, but those who aren't are barely getting by. And we're positioned at the bottom of this massive mountain of houses, and that literally puts the characters on the lower side. Like, they're the ones who are suffering and walking alone in the streets with murderers, and so that's what that implies. And also just mentioning the lighting, it has that like classic chiaroscuro look, the Halloween style lighting, that contrast light and dark, and it kind of makes the streets feel darker and scarier, and like there's something looming there. Some of the shadows literally look like figures, and also on the faces, it kind of gives someone like a dimensionality of you can't trust them. They look dark, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, I think, when we get to Caesar. But yeah, so the seen and the unseen, once again, is contributing to an idea of fascism and oppression. How was the film influenced by Malaise and or Edison? This one was actually kind of toughy for me. I don't know why, but I decided to focus on Edison because I think there is more connecting them. So I think Edison influenced the film by how he altered the story of Frankenstein to reveal an unreliable narrator. Like I said in my prior video journal, I said that I think that the real monster inside Edison's Frankenstein is an extension of Dr. Frankenstein, like a Victor. It's the part of him that's like the morbid curiosity that keeps him from settling down. It's the bad parts of him that is revealed in the scene with the mirror and the monster just appearing on the other side of the mirror. And then seeing the reflection of Victor. So I think that's kind of a cool starting point for this question because of the revelation that we see in Dr. Caligari. When Francis is revealed to be the crazy one all along who made this all up. There's that unreliable narrator that's introduced that like kind of turns I was gonna say turns your hat, but I don't think that's saying, like, puts a spin on everything, and you see everything in a whole new darker light because you also fell for the constructed reality of an ill person. So that all works towards that, and I think Frankenstein can also be seen as like a mentally ill person who falls into hyperbole and supernatural like elements because of his mental illness and his focus on science and his ambition. I also wanted to say that they both kind of have interesting props in the way that the scenes are painted and the way that they composed the setting. I'd be curious to see an expressionist version of Frankenstein's setting. You see all the cool gothic imagery, and you kind of have that same feeling, but told in a different way through the expressionists' darkness and warped and untrustworthy settings. And lastly, for number 4, what horror terror elements are used in the film to frighten or shock the audience? So my knee-jerk first reaction would be César's appearance. He has the black triangles under his eyes that indicates that, he's violent. We kind of have a suspicion that he's the murderer all along, even when it seems like he's not. His eyes in general just like glaze and really haunting. My cat's screaming at me. There's also the darkness and chiaroscuro lighting, which is ominous and creates an insecure feeling from the audience, as well as, suspense. I mean, a lot of the story is about mystery and who's going to die and when. So that also creates that feeling of danger. Another genre staple of horror is the discussion and implication of murder and death. Those are definitely themes in the movie. Another theme is sexuality. Again, with Jane, whether she's with Alan or Francis, that tension and the tension between her and César. She also wears mostly a white dress in some scenes and has a bridal appearance in others. And she also has the dark triangular lipstick, and I feel like that kind of gives her character like an unseen darkness too, kind of how Caesar has his dark makeup. She also has something about her. We find that out is because she's not real and she's just a manifestation of Francis's like yearning. Going on, I have to scroll down my notes. Another theme that we see in the film that is a genre staple is, discussion of insanity. We see that in the settings, the inhospitable and consuming settings make you feel uneasy, and they represent Francis's state of mind. There's also elements of suspense. And lastly, because we're short on time, there's also a presence of a monstrous other. César and how he represents authoritarianism from an out. They do it in an interesting way because he is an instrument or slave to Caligari, who's the actual antagonist. So he's like an obedient soldier of authority. I mean, Caligari's a doctor, so once again, representing the zeitgeist. But yeah, they do that through there. Anyways, tying it up. Have a great day, and thank you.